My daughter-in-law stopped me at the hospital door after I'd driven 15 hours straight. Patricia, Hal, what are you doing here? I told Leo we didn't want family around. For days later, when the hospital called asking how I'd like to pay the $2,300 delivery bill, I smiled for the first time since my grandson was born. I'm Harold Brennan, but everyone calls me Hal. I'm 58 years old, a retired construction project manager with 30 years under my belt. I've been living alone in my Phoenix house since my wife Margaret passed 3 years ago. The place feels too big sometimes, too quiet, but it's got good bones and a workshop out back where I tinker with furniture projects. This whole mess started 3 weeks before that hospital door conversation, on a Thursday evening when I was grilling a lonely burger on my back patio. My phone rang and Patricia's name lit up the screen. My daughter-in-law doesn't call much, maybe birthdays and holidays, so I figured something was up. Patricia, a voice bubbling to the phone. Dad, Hal, the baby's due any day now, and Leo and I have been talking. We'd absolutely love for you to be here when he arrives. You're going to be such an amazing grandfather. I nearly dropped my spatula. In the 5 years she'd been married to my son, Leo, Patricia had never called me Dad. Anything. Usually just a polite hello at family gatherings, if that. But hearing her say I'd be an amazing grandfather hit something deep in my chest. I've been dreaming about this moment for 8 months, ever since Leo announced Patricia was pregnant. Hal, that's wonderful. Patricia, when should I plan to head up? Patricia, well, my due date is next Tuesday, but you know how these things go. Maybe come up this weekend. That way you'll definitely be here when it happens. We've got the guest room all ready for you. I looked around my empty kitchen, at the stack of frozen dinners in the freezer, and the single plate setting I'd been using for months. The idea of being part of something important again, of holding my first grandchild, made me feel more excited than I had since Margaret died. Hal, I'll drive up Saturday morning. Should put me there by dinner time. Patricia, oh, Dad, Hal, that's perfect. Leo is going to be so happy. We can't wait to share this with you. After I hung up, I sat on my patio watching the Arizona sunset, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. I was going to be a grandfather. This baby was going to carry on the Brennan name, and I was going to be there from day one to be part of his life. Friday night, I packed like I was going on the most important trip of my life. My best polo shirts, the good khakis Margaret always said made me look distinguished, new leather shoes I'd been saving for a special occasion. I even bought a tiny construction hard hat at the toy store, thinking it would be funny for pictures. The drive from Phoenix to Denver is no joke. 600 miles of desert highways, mountain passes, and endless stretches where your cell phone shows no bars. I'd made the trip before to visit Leo and Patricia, but never with this kind of excitement building in my chest. I left at 5 a.m. Saturday morning, my truck loaded with gifts for the baby, and a cooler full of Margaret's homemade cookies I'd pulled from the freezer. She'd made dozens before she got sick, always saying they were for special occasions. This felt like the most special occasion we'd had in years. The drive itself was beautiful in that stark desert way. Sunrise over the Sonoran, then gradually climbing into pine forest as I hit the mountains. I stopped for gas and coffee in Flagstaff, called Leo to let him know I was making good time. Patricia answered his phone. Patricia, Dad, Hal, how's the drive going? Any traffic? Hal, smooth sailing so far. Should be there by 2 or 3. Patricia, that's wonderful. Leo's at the hardware store picking up some last-minute baby-proofing stuff, but he'll be back soon. Drive safe, and we'll see you this afternoon. I spent the next 8 hours thinking about all the things I wanted to teach my grandson, how to swing a hammer properly, how to read blueprints. Maybe you want to learn woodworking in my shop. I had visions of weekend visits, teaching him to build birdhouses and toy cars, passing on the hands-on skills that served me well for 30 years in construction. By the time I crossed into Colorado, my back was aching and my legs were stiff, but I was practically vibrating with anticipation. I'd driven 15 hours to be part of the most important moment in my family's life. I was going to meet my grandson, probably hold him in the hospital, take 1,000 pictures to send to my construction buddies back home. I pulled into Leo and Patricia's driveway at 3:17 p.m., exactly when I predicted. Their little house looked perfect, with a new mailbox that had the Brennan family painted in cheerful blue letters. There was even a stork sign in the front yard announcing it's almost time. Patricia met me at the door with the biggest smile I'd ever seen from her. She gave me a hug that lasted longer than usual, kept saying how glad she was that I'd made the trip safely. Patricia, Leo's so excited you're here. This baby is going to be so lucky to have you as his grandfather. That weekend was perfect. Patricia made my favorite pot roast. Leo and I watched college football, and we spent hours talking about baby names and nursery colors. Patricia seemed genuinely excited to have me there, asking about my construction projects, even mentioning how she hoped the baby would inherit my handy gene. For the first time since Margaret died, I felt like I was truly part of family again. Sunday night, Patricia started having contractions. Nothing serious, just Braxton Hicks, but it got us all excited. Leo was running around checking hospital bags. Patricia was timing everything on her phone, and I was just trying to stay out of the way while feeling useful. Leo, Dad, I'm so glad you're here. Having you around makes this feel more real somehow, like the baby's gonna have a real family. Monday came and went with false alarms. Tuesday morning, Patricia's water broke at 6 a.m. I'd never seen Leo move so fast, grabbing bags and keys while Patricia calmly finished her coffee like she'd done this a dozen times before. Leo, Dad, we'll call you as soon as we know anything. I spent the day pacing around their house, checking my phone every 5 minutes, reorganizing their already perfect nursery. Finally, at 11 p.m., Leo called. Leo, Dad, this is it. Patricia's in active labor. We're in room 314 if you want to come wait in the family area. I threw on my clothes and drove to Denver General Hospital faster than I probably should have. The maternity ward at midnight was quiet, just a few nurses and the soft beeping of machines. I found room 314 easily enough, and there was Leo pacing outside the door like an expectant father should be. But when he saw me, his face changed. Not relief, not joy, something closer to panic. Leo, Dad, what are you doing here? The question hit me like a cold slap. How? What do you mean? You just called me. You said I could wait in the family area. Leo's eyes darted toward the delivery room door, then back to me. Leo, Patricia changed her mind about having family here. She wants it to be just us. How? I drove 15 hours to be here, Leo. I've been waiting all weekend. I'm not asking to be in the delivery room, just to be nearby when my grandson arrives. Leo, I know, Dad, but Patricia's really adamant about this. She said the stress of having family around could complicate the delivery. The doctor agreed. Something in his voice told me this conversation had been planned. The way he couldn't meet my eyes, the rehearsed sound of his explanation. But I was too tired and too shocked to fight in a hospital corridor at midnight. How? Fine. I'll go back to the house and wait for your call. Leo, thanks, Dad. I'll call you as soon as he's born. I drove back through empty Denver streets, feeling more confused and angry by the mile. Patricia had seemed so genuine about wanting me there. We had such a nice weekend together. But maybe first-time mothers got anxious about these things. Maybe I was being too sensitive. I spent the next 8 hours sitting in Leo's living room, checking my phone every few minutes. When he finally called at 8 a.m., his voice was exhausted but happy. Leo, Dad, he's here. Theodore Leo Brennan, 7 pounds 2 ounces. He's absolutely perfect. How? Congratulations, son. When can I meet him? Leo, well, Patricia's really tired. The delivery was rougher than expected. Maybe give us a day or two to settle in. I felt like I was begging for scraps from my own family. How? Leo, I'm his grandfather. I drove 15 hours to be here for this moment. Leo, I know and we appreciate that. But Patricia needs time to recover. You understand, right? No, I didn't understand. But what was I going to do? Demand to see my own grandson. I spent 2 more days in that house, ordering takeout and watching daytime TV while my son and daughter-in-law bonded with my grandson in a hospital 3 miles away. Every few hours, I'd text Leo asking about visiting, and he'd respond with variations of Patricia's not ready yet or the doctors want to keep things quiet. Thursday morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to hospital myself, thinking I could at least see Theodore through the nursery window. But when I got to maternity ward, the nurse told me they'd been discharged that morning. Discharged. They'd taken my grandson home without even telling me. I called Leo immediately. How? You took the baby home without letting me know, Leo? Leo, Patricia wanted to get settled in her own space. She's been really anxious about germs and visitors. How? I'm not a visitor, Leo. I'm your father. I'm Theodore's grandfather. Leo, I know that. Look, maybe next week, when Patricia's feeling stronger. I'd driven 15 hours, waited 4 days, and now they wanted me to wait another week to meet my own grandson. How? Leo, I'm driving back to Phoenix this afternoon. Leo, Dad, don't be like that. We'll figure something out. But I was done begging. If they wanted to exclude me from Theodore's first days of life, that was their choice. I wasn't going to sit around Denver being treated like an unwanted guest. The drive back to Phoenix was the longest 15 hours of my life. Every mile felt like failure. I kept replaying the weekend, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. Had I been too pushy, too excited? Had Patricia felt overwhelmed by my presence? By the time I got home Sunday afternoon, I was exhausted and confused and hurt in ways I hadn't felt since Margaret's funeral. I unpacked my bags, put away the unused gifts for Theodore, and tried to convince myself that new parents sometimes needed space. My phone buzzed with a text from Leo. Dad, hope you made it home safely. Patricia's doing great, and Theodore is such a good baby. We'll send pictures soon. Pictures. After excluding me from his birth and making me feel like an outsider in my own family. They thought pictures would make everything better. I was staring at that text message when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Denver General Hospital. Hospital rep. Is this Harold Brennan? How? Yes, ma'am. Hospital rep. We have some paperwork issues regarding the birth of Theodore Leo Brennan. The insurance claim was denied, and we need to discuss payment arrangements of the delivery bill. My heart started pounding, but not with anxiety, with something that felt like vindication. Hal, I'm sorry, but I think there's been some confusion. I'm not responsible for that bill. Hospital rep. Our records show you as a financial guarantor for Patricia Brennan's delivery. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. After 30 years managing construction contracts, I know fraud when I hear it. Hal, ma'am, I never signed any financial responsibility forms. Hospital rep. According to our records, you signed financial responsibility forms for Mrs. Patricia Brennan's delivery. Let me check the timestamp. The forms were submitted electronically on November 15th at 11:47 p.m. November 15th, the night I was driving through the middle of nowhere, Utah, somewhere around Salt Lake City. I'd been on the road for 8 hours, exhausted and focused on getting to Denver safely. My phone had no service for most of that stretch. How exactly were these forms submitted? Hospital rep, electronically, through our patient portal. The signature appears to be yours, Mr. Brennan. The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. While I was white-knuckling it through a snowstorm on I-70, desperate to reach Denver before my grandson was born, Patricia was forging my signature on financial documents. Hal, I need to see these forms immediately. Can you email them to me? Hospital rep, certainly. What email address should I use? 20 minutes later, I was staring at documents that made my blood boil. Not only had Patricia forged my signature, but she'd somehow gotten hold of my social security number, my address, and details about my financial situation that I'd never shared with anyone except my bank. The forms clearly stated that as a paternal grandfather, I was requesting to be financially responsible for all delivery costs as a gift to the new family. There was even a forged note saying I was excited to cover these expenses, that I had specifically requested this arrangement. But what really got me was a timestamp, 11:47 p.m. on November 15th. I pulled out my phone and checked my location history. At 11:47 p.m. that night, I was at a gas station in Moab, Utah, filling up my truck. I even had the credit card receipt to prove it. I called the hospital back. Hal, this is Harold Brennan. I just reviewed the financial responsibility forms, and I need to report fraud. Hospital rep, fraud, sir? Hal, first, I never signed these documents. Second, they were submitted without my knowledge or consent while I was driving to Denver. I have GPS tracking and receipts that prove I was in Utah when these forms were supposedly signed by me in Colorado. The billing representative's tone changed immediately. Hospital rep. Sir, if you're alleging fraud, I need to transfer you to our legal department. Perfect. While I waited on hold, I started gathering evidence like I was preparing a construction project proposal. Screenshots of Patricia's text inviting me to Denver. Call logs showing exactly when she contacted me. Photos I'd taken during the drive with GPS timestamps. Even my hotel reservation and gas station receipts. Legal department. Mr. Brennan, this is the legal department. I understand you're disputing financial responsibility forms. How? I'm not disputing them. I'm reporting identity theft and fraud. I have documentation proving these forms were forged. For the next hour, I walked them through everything. Patricia's invitation, the 15-hour drive, being excluded from the hospital, and then discovering the fraudulent documents. They were particularly interested in the timeline and the fact that Patricia had manipulated me into traveling while simultaneously committing fraud in my name. Legal department. Mr. Brennan, this is indeed a serious matter. We'll be filing a police report and turning this over to our fraud investigation team. In the meantime, all charges to your name are suspended pending investigation. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about how perfectly Patricia had played this. She got me out of the way during the birth, excluded me from meeting Theodore, and planned to stick me with a $2,300 bill as a final insult. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 30 years reviewing contracts, specifications, and legal documents. I knew exactly how to build a case, and Patricia had just handed me all the evidence I needed. Tuesday morning brought a call from Detective Albert Peterson with the Denver Police Department. Detective Peterson, Mr. Brennan, we've been assigned to investigate the fraud case you reported. Can you walk me through the timeline of events? For 45 minutes, I gave him the most detailed account I could manage. The invitation, the drive, the hospital exclusion, the fraudulent forms. I had documentation for everything. Detective Peterson, Mr. Brennan, do you have evidence supporting your version of events? Hal, I have text messages, call logs, GPS data, hotel receipts, and gas station receipts proving exactly where I was when these forms were allegedly signed. I also have photos from my drive with timestamps. Detective Peterson, we'll need copies of all of that. This is looking like a clear case of identity theft and premeditated fraud. Premeditated. Patricia hadn't just made a panicked decision in the delivery room. She'd planned this entire scenario from the beginning. Hal, Detective, what happens next? Detective Peterson, we'll be getting warrants for hospital security footage, digital records from the form submission, and Patricia's financial accounts. If our investigation confirms what you've told me, your daughter-in-law will be facing multiple felony charges. Wednesday afternoon, my doorbell rang. A woman in her 30s stood there holding a manila envelope. Woman, Harold Brennan? How? Yes. Woman, I'm Nancy Davis, investigator with Denver General Hospital's Fraud Prevention Department. I have some evidence for you to review. She handed me the envelope. Inside were printed screenshots of security footage from the hospital's family lounge. The images showed Patricia hunched over a laptop at 11:52 p.m. on November 15th, typing on what appeared to be the hospital's patient portal. Nancy Davis, Mr. Brennan, these were captured approximately 5 minutes after the financial responsibility forms were submitted under your name. There was Patricia, clear as day, in the hospital waiting area. The timestamp showed I was still 4 hours away from Denver, somewhere in the Utah mountains with no cell service. How? What happens now? Nancy Davis. The evidence is overwhelming. Hospital fraud involving identity theft across state lines is a federal offense. Your daughter-in-law is looking at significant prison time. That evening, my phone rang. Leo's name on the screen. Leo, Dad, what the hell did you do? His voice was shaking with anger, but underneath, I heard something else. Fear. How? Hello to you too, Leo. I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking. Leo, don't play games with me. The police showed up at our house this morning with a warrant. Patricia's been arrested for fraud. They said you pressed charges. I settled back in my recliner, watching the Arizona sunset through my living room window. How? I didn't press charges, Leo. I simply reported identity theft when the hospital called, asking how I wanted to pay Patricia's delivery bill. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, Leo, what delivery bill? Hal, the $2,300 bill for Theodore's birth that your wife stuck me with while you two were playing Happy Family without me. Leo, that's impossible. Our insurance covered everything. Poor Leo, still so naive about the woman he'd married. Hal, your insurance was denied, son. That's why the hospital called me. Apparently, Patricia made me financially responsible for her delivery while I was driving through Utah to see my grandson, who I was then not allowed to meet. Another long silence. I could practically hear the pieces clicking together in his mind. Leo, Dad, there has to be some explanation. Patricia wouldn't do something like that. Would she? Hal, the same woman who invited me to drive 15 hours of birth, then had you turn me away at the hospital door. The same woman who's avoided every one of my calls since Theodore was born. I heard Patricia's voice in background, shrill and panicked. Leo covered the phone, but I could make out fragments. Patricia claiming it was all a mistake, that she'd only put my name down as emergency contact, that she never meant for me to be responsible for bills. Leo, Dad, Patricia says this is all a misunderstanding. Hal, Leo, I've seen the documents. I spent 30 years reviewing contracts and legal paperwork. Your wife committed fraud, and there's video evidence of her doing it. Leo, voice cracking, Jesus Christ. Dad, what happens now? Before I could answer, my call waiting beeped. FBI. Hal. Leo, I have to take this. We'll talk later. FBI agent. Mr. Brennan, this is Agent Nancy Davis with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. We need to discuss your case with Patricia Foster. Foster, not Brennan. Hal. What do you mean, Foster? Agent Davis, Mr. Brennan, Patricia Foster is not who she claims to be. We've discovered she's been running identity fraud schemes against multiple families over the past 3 years. Your case broke this open for us. I sat down hard. How? How many families? Agent Davis, at least 6 that we've identified so far. Total losses exceed $47,000. Patricia targets older men, particularly widowers, by marrying into their families and then systematically defrauding relatives. My head was spinning. Patricia wasn't just my manipulative daughter-in-law. She was a professional criminal who targeted my family specifically. Agent Davis, Mr. Brennan, we need you to come to Denver for a more detailed interview. There are aspects of this case that suggest a much larger operation. 2 days later, I was sitting in an FBI conference room looking at evidence that made my stomach turn. Patricia Foster had researched my family for months before she ever met Leo. She knew my financial situation, my property values, even details about Margaret's death and my resulting vulnerability. Agent Davis, showing me a thick folder. Patricia specifically targeted your son because our investigation shows she knew you were a widower with substantial assets and strong family loyalty. She identified you as what her associates call a high-value secondary target. How associates? There were others involved. Agent Davis. She's part of a larger network run by a man named Vincent Foster, who we believe is her actual husband. They recruit women to establish relationships with financially stable men, then systematically defraud their families. The room felt like it was spinning. Leo's entire relationship had been a lie from the beginning. How? Agent Davis. Does my son know about any of this? Agent Davis. We don't believe so, Mr. Brennan. Your son appears to be as much a victim as you are. Patricia Foster deceived him about her identity, her background, everything. The trial took place 4 months later. I sat in the federal courthouse in Denver, watching as the full scope of Patricia's crimes was laid out for the jury. 6 families, 14 individual victims, a sophisticated identity theft operation spanning 4 states. When Patricia took the stand, she tried to claim she was forced into it by abusive partners. But the prosecution had evidence showing she was an equal participant, often the one who initiated contact with targets and planned the fraudulent schemes. Prosecutor. Ms. Foster, you researched Harold Brennan's financial status for months before meeting his son, didn't you? Patricia. I don't remember. Prosecutor. You knew he was a widower with substantial retirement assets, correct? Patricia. I might have heard something. Prosecutor. We have records showing you accessed Mr. Brennan's credit reports and property records 6 weeks before you met Leo Brennan. Did you target this family specifically because of their vulnerability and assets? Patricia's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The jury had seen who she really was. During victim impact statements, I stood up and looked directly at Patricia. How? You didn't just steal money from me. You stole the joy of becoming a grandfather. You manipulated my grief over losing my wife. You turned my son into an accomplice in your fraud. And you plan to use my grandson as leverage for future crimes. The judge sentenced Patricia Foster to 12 years in federal prison and full restitution to all victims. Leo and Theodore moved in with me after the sentencing. My son needed time to rebuild his life, and honestly, I needed them too. The house that had felt too big and too quiet for 3 years was suddenly full of baby laughter and the sounds of a young father learning to navigate single parenthood. Leo, one evening, watching Theodore play with blocks on my living room floor, Dad, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I chose her over you. How? You didn't know, son. None of us did. She was a professional. Leo, but I should have stood up for you. I should have questioned why she wanted to exclude you. I watched my grandson stack blocks, then knocked them down with delighted squeals. How? Leo, the important thing is we're here now. Theodore is going to grow up knowing his grandfather. That's what matters. Patricia Foster had tried to use my love for family against me. But in the end, that same love gave me the strength to fight back and protect the people who mattered most. Some daughters-in-law underestimate the grandfather they're trying to fool. Patricia Foster learned that lesson the hard way. Trust, but verify. I learned that day that loving your family doesn't mean blindly trusting everyone who enters it. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who know exactly which heartstrings to pull. 30 years of reading contracts and spotting inconsistencies didn't retire when I did. Those skills saved my family when it mattered most. Proof that experience is one thing criminals can never forge.